Hey guys, so Deadline recently released an article on Season 2 of House of the Dragon, and it's got some pretty big news, both good and bad. I've left a link to the article below. So, the bad news is that House of the Dragon Season 2 will only be 8 episodes. The good news is that Season 3 is apparently mapped out and close to be greenlit, the two being related. Now, the HBO spokesperson said that the decision to cut down Season 2 to 8 episodes and then tack on Season 3 was story-driven, but come on. We know that this isn't the case. We know that HBO has been doing massive cost-cutting. Deadline even brings up in the article HBO leadership's brutal focus on this. We know this is cost-cutting driven. They know it's cost-cutting driven. Dogs know this is cost-cutting driven. Many people involved with House of the Dragon have contracts where they're paid by the episode, so if you reduce the number of episodes, you save money. Meanwhile, on the other end, income is largely determined by monthly subscriptions to HBO Max. House of the Dragon Season 1 played over 3 months, August, September, October. An 8-episode season can be structured in the same way, 3 months. We know that House of the Dragon is coming back in summer of 2024 after the Emmy cutoff date in May and the NBA Finals in June, a July release date being most likely. Dragon Demands has a whole video on why exactly it's likely July 2024. And if you look at your 2024 calendar, you can imagine, say, a July 14th premiere date, which would put the finale on September 1st. That's 3 months of subscriptions. In fact, most possible House of the Dragon premiere dates give you 3 months. The exceptions are July 7th, August 4th, and August 11th. So yeah, it seems that people are getting Cadbury cream-egged on this, paying the same amount and getting less, which is sad as Season 1 was incredibly rushed. In fact, I would say it's the season's greatest weakness. We really needed at least 2 or 3 more episodes. Now, in the coming weeks, you're going to hear the argument that we're actually getting more House of the Dragon or the same amount. House of the Dragon was probably first envisioned to be 3 seasons with 10 episodes each, or 30 episodes. And there's now some talk of a 4th season, so it could be that for Season 1 we have 10 episodes, plus 8 for Season 2, plus 8 for Season 3, plus 6 for Season 4, which is 32 episodes, which is more. Or 10 plus 8 plus 6 plus 6, which would be 30, the same amount. This whole thing might be more about stretching the same amount of content over a longer period, rather than a shrinkage in content. However, the article says that Condal and Martin continue to go back and forth on the number of seasons, 3 or 4. And we know that George R. R. Martin always asks for more episodes to fit stuff in. He's very consistent with this. So no, I don't think this is about stretching content. Nor do I think it's about restructuring story. I think this is about shrinkage. That's what George is fighting. So what does this all mean for Season 2, and what will Season 2 look like? And we're going to get into spoiler territory here. So this is largely speculation, but getting into Ryan Condal's head and assuming that this is a show about Rhaenyra Targaryen, we can more or less map out what House of the Dragon's 3 seasons would be. Season 1 is the lead up to the war, with Storm's End being the climax. Season 2, the first half of the war, with Rhaenyra taking King's Landing as the climax. And Season 3 is the second half of the war, with Rhaenyra's downfall and death near the end. 3 acts: prelude, rise, fall. Now yes, Aegon rules many months after Rhaenyra, but I think this can likely be abbreviated. This is probably the argument between Ryan Condal and George R. R. Martin. Do you tack on a 4th season to deal with Aegon's downfall and the Hour of the Wolf? And as much as I would like to see this, the Hour of the Wolf, Corlys's days on the throne, Oakenfist, I don't think House of the Dragon is actually going to tell that tale. It's Rhaenyra's story. After the prologue, she's the opening scene of the show, she's the final scene of the show in the first half, she's the opening scene of the show in the second half, and she's the final scene of the season. It's all about her. Once she dies, the story winds down. So now let's talk about what Season 2 would look like. What we know right now is that Season 2 is 8 episodes, and that a major battle was moved from Season 2 to Season 3. Now there are a lot of events in the Dance of the Dragons that are not going to make it to screen. For example, I would be very surprised if the Red Kraken appears. He's not very important, he's someone who could be easily cut. However, there are quite a few big events that we can't really get around. They have to be adapted. And a good way to figure out which ones will be presented is to think about the shock aspect of each one. And when I say shock, I mean a major event that occurs suddenly that alters the fate of a main character. What we learned from Season 1 is that shock is the driver of the show. In Season 1, nearly every episode ended with a punch. Daemon was kicked out of town and there was a big prophecy and Rhaenyra was made heir. Viserys chooses Alicent and Daemon joins with Corlys. Daemon crazily wins the war. Rhaenyra is forced to marry and more prophecy stuff. Joffrey Lonmouth is beaten to death. Harwin is murdered and Laena dies. Rhaenyra and Daemon marry and murder Laenor. Prophecy, Viserys dies. Aegon is crowned and Rhaenys busts through the floor. Rhaenyra is crowned and Luke dies. The shocks are the plot points. And when we're thinking about shocks, let's assume we're talking about our current main characters of Rhaenyra, Daemon, and Alicent, plus their children, along with Corlys, Rhaenys, Criston, and Otto. And let's also assume that the Dragonseeds and Daeron will be main characters next season. And so when I think about the beats of the war that greatly affect those main characters, I think of the following. To start things off, we have the blood and cheese incident. Obviously, this leads to the death of Prince Jaehaerys, but Jaehaerys isn't really a character. It's more about what it does to Aegon, Helaena, and Alicent. And this is followed up with Riverland losses and Otto's departure. Criston Cole becomes Hand, and now Aegon is unhinged. Next, we have the Cargyle assassination attempt. This actually doesn't really affect the plot that much, but it's been set up and many pages are dedicated to it in Fire and Blood. We're not going to not have it. And then we get to Rook's Rest. This is an enormous event where Rhaenys and Meleys die, and Aegon and Sunfire become injured. In the aftermath, Aemond essentially becomes king of the realm, something that's been set up quite a bit. I could see this as the big mid-season event. Now in Fire and Blood, after Rook's Rest, there is the Dragonseed recruitment. This is an event that can definitely be moved around, though some filler is really needed between Rook's Rest and the next event, which is the Gullet. So look out for Episode 5 being mostly about the fallout from Episode 4, with a lot of people bickering. Rhaenyra and Corlys are definitely going to yell at each other, and Aemond has to come to terms with the fact that he's essentially king. And then we'll likely have the Gullet in Episode 6. This is where Jace dies and Rhaenyra's son Viserys ends up getting kidnapped. It's a pretty big event that can't be too close to Rook's Rest, but also can't be too close to the conquest of King's Landing. In Episode 7 there could be several events, though none of them are too essential. There's Honeywine, which is the introduction of Daeron. And there's also Fish Feed, which is the death of Jason Lannister, but he's barely a character. Even though this is a huge battle, I really only see it being shown if the Winter Wolves are a big part of it, with that being set up with Jace and the Pact of Ice and Fire. The most important event in Episode 7 would actually be Aemon's Riverland strike. He needs to leave King's Landing and take Harrenhal. Maybe time will be dedicated for him and Alice Rivers. They maybe set up him liking older women in Season 1. And then likely starting at the very end of Episode 7 and throughout Episode 8, we have the conquest of King's Landing by Rhaenyra. It's really the perfect way to end the season. Rhaenyra and Alicent confront each other, Otto is beheaded. It's a pretty big deal. I couldn't really see the season ending earlier because then we don't have a face-off between Alicent and Rhaenyra. And I only see the next natural stopping point being the God's Eye, and that would simply cram too much into one season, especially one with only 8 episodes. You'd need to somehow shove in Butcher's Ball, First Tumbleton, and Dragonstone. Now some might ask what's the big battle that was moved from Season 2 into Season 3? And I think the answer is Butcher's Ball, which is where Criston Cole dies. I could see in the original plan Butcher's Ball happening at roughly the same time as the conquest of King's Landing, linking Criston Cole to the events of King's Landing thematically. And yes, Butcher's Ball is linked to the conquest of King's Landing in that Criston is lured away, but it's not really important when the battle happens. You could actually have it happen before, after, during. It doesn't make any difference. The battle is only notable because Criston Cole dies. It actually has almost no effect on the plot or any of the characters. Nobody really cares that Criston Cole's dead, which is kind of the point of his arc. He did everything for honor and glory and got none of that. Anyway, we will see if my outline is more or less correct in a year and some months. Anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.